to the nerdy neighborhood, everybody, and welcome back to your friendly neighborhood comic show. I'm your host, Lauren, your friendly neighborhood bi, and as you can tell, I am joined by an enthusiastic new neighbor, indie comic book creator, Louis Southard. I hope I said that right. How are you, man?
It's Southard, but I don't blame you for that. Nearly everyone.
That's what I get.
You want to try again?
So, okay, Southard, is that it?
Yeah, Southard.
Okay, there we go. All right. See, I have the Southern twang to say it. I just don't know to say it.
Okay. We'll go again.
All right. Please welcome our newest neighbor, who is very enthusiastic and putting me on the spot, which I actually love this change of pace. Louis Southard is here joining us, everybody.
Hello.
How are you?
Hello, everyone. I'm happy to do this for the very first time. No, it's such a pleasure. I was just telling you before we started recording, I'm a big fan of the show, and I sent you the cold call email, and I'm like, well, no one ever responds to me, but the fact that you did, I'm like, oh, hell yeah, here we are. So I'm really glad to be on the show and to talk about the books I have in the works. So yeah, this is a pretty good dream come true.
Oh, well, I am happy to help with the dream, man. It is super exciting having you on. That's what the neighborhood is all about, bringing people together, especially those that, maybe aren't the biggest on the world yet. But they're big in the neighborhood. That's all that matters.
I'm already the creative genius of a generation, if you go into my website. Also the humblest,
Obviously, yeah.
My humility is known to make people cower in adoration.
I like the use of the word cower. It's a very specific, it's a very visual word.
Oh, yes.
Well, man, you've already been picked up by Scout Comics, which is always a great sign. So congrats on that. They are one of the bigger indie publishers right now, I would argue. They're catching up to, Boom and things like that. So that's already a huge win for you and your humility, as you said earlier.
Yes. It's helping the good old ego. No, I got this book that we're going to be talking about, Midnight Western Theater Witch Trial, is the prequel to my first venture with Scout. We got together. Well, it's kind of a funny story. In 2020, I had a book coming out with Action Lab Entertainment. Those in the industry, that's probably like a heart-stopping moment if you know your Action Lab lore. Because 2020 books about to come out, industry shutdowns because of COVID. I'm going through my emails and I have a contract waiting for me from Scout, saying oh, we saw this pitch that you sent, we like it, we want to pick up the book. And at that point, I just lost my job, and I'm like, oh, well, there's a job just sitting right here. I'm like, yes, publish the book, and we made the first one. And the first one was a big, I guess it was received really well by fans. It got me fans and readers. Critics liked it. And overall, it was a good first outing, I would say. And it did well enough that my editors they came to me and said, hey, you have an idea for a second one? And fortunately, I did. And here we are, because took a little bit, peaks and valleys, but the book is done, and it's gonna come out this July.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I mean, it's so you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but this cover alone, when I started reading the issue and I saw this, I was like, oh man, this looks like something that the biggest indie publishers would publish. Like the cover alone and just the title, like Midnight Western Theater Witch Trial. Like there's just something I'm trying to think of the great word. There's just something enrapturing about it. That's a strong word, right? There's something that really brings you in and says, what the hell is happening here? I gotta know now.
I have to thank my partner for this whole inspiration for the covers, because the original series had several black and white covers. And when I was doing this one, I'm like, well, I want everything to be completely different. And I said I want all the covers to be uber colorful and to be very artistically in your face. I'll say that. And they suggested Art Nouveau, and I was like, oh, what's that? And then I Googled it, and it was one of those things I had always seen, but I never knew the actual name of. And I was like, okay, bam, that's it. We're doing that. And I was fortunate enough to meet the cover artist, Julianne Gria, who she did a phenomenal job on all 5 covers. They're just beautiful Art Nouveau pieces. And like you said, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but I think all these covers will make you go, oh, damn, that's a good book, just because of how beautiful they are. I think that's the word I would say. And that kind of makes me feel good that I have a book that, at least on the surface, looks or invokes beauty to some extent. And it's just so completely different from the first one. And I'm just very happy with the decision to go in this specific direction.
Yeah, I completely agree. It brought me right in, that's for sure, before I even got to the first page saying who wrote the story and who did all the other great stuff that,
it was all downhill from there. I know. Don't worry.
Not at all. Not at all. I'm a big fan of, historical stuff. I'm a big fan of witch stuff. I grew up on Charmed, which I know that's not super cool, but the original Charmed is one of my favorite things of all time. So it's fine. Don't worry about it. But this had a lot of the elements that made me think of, that show as well, in terms of, you got this really great plot that starts right at the beginning, way back in time. Then we get a tiny time jump and we're right back with, our main character and another character that's super important. Obviously you've got witches and you've got, other supernatural elements like zombies. But there's a nice balance, I think, between the mystery and the story and the plot you're telling, and also just kind of some fun. It still feels like, even though this is taking place in the 1800s, it still feels like I can be in the story too, which I don't get in most, stories set in a historical time period. Is that something you're kind of hoping here, that was still something that people could see themselves a part of?
Well, I think with this specific story, let's say this is, I mentioned earlier, it's a prequel sequel. One of my big missions with this specific book was to make it incredibly new reader friendly. I'll say that because I can't as egotistical and narcissistic as I am, I can't lie and say that the first book was like the most successful book of all time. It wasn't. It's not like it became a household name. So with this specific one, it was almost like, okay, you have a second chance and you're exploring more in this world, and you can't. I think it would be foolhardy for me to just be like, oh well, I only want to appease the people who read the first book. People who get it are going to get it, and we're gonna keep going, because I think that's not the mission of any comic, especially if you're like with this, you're starting with a new number one, you're starting effectively from scratch again. So I really wanted for it to also be an introductory piece, and it being a prequel, that also helps because you get to learn the backstory of the main character Hortensia. And I don't know, I'm a believer in writing a story, it's good to have your set dressing. It's good to have like with this, it's a historical piece, and that's all well and good. But I mean, me personally as a reader, I'm not going to be interested in something unless there's like you were saying, like something I can more relate to. Because with this specific story, it's not much of a spoiler, but it's a coming of age story, and it's just about this young woman adventurer basically dealing with problems with her mom, as well as just trying to make her own decisions and meet different people, and making mistakes. I'll say that. And to me, that's 10 times more interesting than everything else. Like you said, there's witches, there's zombies, and there's all sorts of crazy, wild stuff. But I mean, to me, that's all extra.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned, kind of that the mother-daughter relationship essentially that's in here. I love seeing that in comics, because I feel like so often in comics we get like the father-son relationship or the father-daughter, and so I feel like it's fewer and in between that we get the mother, daughter kind of stories there. But we still have this other plot, you know, in terms of like there's a demon that's kind of in there. We don't really know how much he has in the, you know, plot or anything, because he's kind of just the beginning, and then we get more into the other stuff. But you know, how did you kind of decide like to balance that out in terms of, you know, you've got a plot you're building up, you've got these other characters and pieces leading up to that, and then you've also got this mother-daughter relationship that seems to really ground the, you know, our main character.
That's a good question. I just make it up as I go. I just no, that's not. I mean, I do. Well, let's get raw and real for a second. When they came to me, well, the original book was an anthology about you know, Hortensia as the woman in black. That's like her Wild West outlaw moniker, and she's running around with her lover and right-hand man, Alexander Wortham, the reluctant vampire. And you know, the whole thing is like she's like this tough as nails type of lady, and then it's just this very like pacifistic, very, I would say, whiny man. Whininess coming from myself, of course, or inspired by myself. But I love that dynamic. But that book was very simple. It's you know, each issue is a different adventure, and they have a different problem. And over the course of it, you go over their relationship, and you don't really, I guess, examine. There's stuff with him, but there's nothing really with her. And I kind of left her backstory vague for a reason. She relates to Alexander when he reveals his tragic backstory, but you know, for her it was very much like, yeah, same, been there, buddy. You know, like I get it, and that's that. So with this book, I'm like, okay. When they came to me and they're like, let's make another one, I was like, okay, more one and done adventures with the duo and kind of flesh them out. But I'm like, I don't want to do that again. And the raw and real bit was when at that time in my life, I was staying in a small town. I was living in a small town, and it was, I think a good, what's the word? Analogy would be for people who've seen like Blue Velvet or Twin Peaks, where it's like this very picturesque, very beautiful town with people who are very friendly. But the longer you stay, the more like grimy and more upsetting the town becomes.
Right.
And I was kind of dealing with the effects of living there. And when they came to me with this, like, do you have an idea? I'm like, okay, well, I want to take this feeling, or take this like, yeah, take these things I'm thinking about and put into this story. And luckily I can do that with Hortensia because I didn't really flesh out her backstory.
Right.
And it kind of amalgamated in this like, not beautiful, but it was like a perfect mixture of things. Because at that point, basically I felt like I had something I wanted to talk about. And that deals with what this book is, or at least with the antagonistic side of the book. But I guess if I am even answering your question at all, the source of it was just I guess for this time around I felt like I had something I needed to get off my chest, and this was a book that helped me do that.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. It's really interesting to see how like life experiences, and you know, when you have something you want to say that's kind of happened to you, or you know, kind of you've seen it secondhand or things like that, how there's so many different ways to tell that, because everything you just said that, you know, kind of you wanted to say and how you said it here makes complete sense. But if I had been going through what you went through, I would have never thought, let me write a story with witches and zombies, and that's how I can tell this. So it's really great to hear how you did that.
Yeah, that's how you got to lure people in. Yeah, no, that's how I get you. You know, you're like, oh man, I'm gonna read about vampires, right? And that's like with the first one, like, oh, cool, vampire adventures, and it's like, oh no, it's about like two wounded people trying to like meet each other and like get to know each other, but they always one person's more open, the other one's like keeping it's just a weird relationship. And then this one, it's just like, oh man, what if you just what if your mother was just like not like all over the place and you just felt whatever. But I'm not into, I mean, I am into the crazy side of it, and that's that is the fun of it. That's how you get people into it, or that's how I get into it. But there's a balance. There's got to be a balance. It can't just all be doom and gloom.
I think that's one of my favorite things about a lot of supernatural stories in general and stuff. I tend to like the stories that do have a lot of these human themes or traits or what have you to them, because even, you know, because I have that separation of, well, it's a supernatural world, so it's not real, but then, you know, kind of like you mentioned earlier, I can still relate to it on a level, but it also creates in my head as a reader this thing of, oh, maybe I want to live in that world. I have to like mentally slap myself and be like, no, you do not. That's a horrible idea.
I don't think I would ever want to live in the Midnight Western Theater world. It seems terrible. It seems like everyone's miserable.
And you created it.
I know. Well, what does that say about me? But no, like, but I would say this book is also very funny in its own way. I don't know. It's not. I'm trying to make it. It almost sounds like I'm trying to make it trauma porn at this point, because it's not. It is funny. It is dramatic. And it does go into like fantastical and realistic stuff. But I guess to come up with a more succinct way of what I'm trying to say is the horror of the first book was mostly just all completely supernatural. Exactly what you would expect, because it dealt with werewolves. It dealt with vampires. It dealt with like shapeshifters and, you know, just what you would expect. And with this one, instead of doing, you know, just like an encore performance, I wanted the horror to be more grounded and more real, not more realistic, but more realistic, like what you would expect. What's scary about real life? And then I'm like, let's put that in an actual horror book with, like what you said, witches and whatever. And it makes all the supernatural scary stuff pale in comparison. But even though well, we can go into characters if you want, because like it is the supernatural that's driving some of the more petty human horror in the book.
Yep. Yeah, I know. You know, or Hortensia as our main character, obviously, you know, we get that immediate, you know, kind of backdrop at the start of the issue, and then we go right in there. Sarah Bishop, you know, kind of like her motherly role. I was still trying to, I'm really interested to continue learning about her throughout the other issues, because especially throughout the first issue, I was reading it and I was like, I can't tell like her complete motivations other than, okay, she's definitely got her own agenda, and yet she's also trying to actually genuinely, it seems like at least, you know, prioritize Hortensia as like her daughter essentially. And so it's very interesting to see characters like that, who have their own agenda, especially, you know, as motherly roles, but they also claim they care so much about their children. Like, I imagine it's hard to balance out, like, what in the end actually wins out for them. Is it actually their love for their daughter or their child, or is it going to be their own intentions? You know, I think of characters like the mother in the Tangled film from Disney, or Mystique from the X-Men is another crazy example that constantly changes.
I just tangent. I love Mystique and Destiny as Rogue's moms in the books. Just like I can't get over. I think about this panel a lot of Destiny trying to get along with Gambit, but she just thinks like you don't deserve to be with my daughter. Just like there's this beautiful panel of just like he walks away and she's just like doing the strangling motion, like
a reality show.
Yeah. I always got a kick out of that, but. I guess with this book with Sarah, she does have an agenda, and you do learn more about her motivations as it goes along. But I can say this, that without a doubt a spoiler. It's not a spoiler. She loves Hortensia. That's to her. That's her daughter. I think for me, more the dynamic is, I don't think Sarah is a perfect parent, and I think she knows she's not a perfect parent. She's just trying her best. And I think having a character who's not really, I don't think she's insecure or directly, she's not upset that she can't provide as much as she could or be the person she wants to be. She's more so happy, like, or contented with, like, I can give you all I can.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, in real life, sometimes all you can give someone is still not enough, especially when you're dealing with like a turbulent parent-child relationship. Because what are children but what, like our parents, they're supposed to grow beyond what our parents are, right? And I think with that's definitely the vibe of the book. It's like, what do you do when your kid's is just bursting to break free and do their own thing? And I think that's the struggle. That's the struggle of the book, because they've just reached that turning point in their relationship.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And, kind of in the middle of what you're saying, of reaching that turbulent point, there's a plague doctor character that seems to have some, former, a past with Sarah Bishop. And I think to me also added some more of those Mystique or Destiny character vibes, because they go back for, years and years and years. We even know how old they are. And here we basically know how old Sarah is, though. And that plague doctor, kind of seems to care, but also not give a shit at the same time. Like, I was trying to figure him out too.
He's like your quirky uncle. He's like your deadbeat uncle who's like doing his own thing. And he pops in to give you like advice, but he's not good at it. You're like, his heart's maybe in the right place, but you're not sure. You're like somebody who goes on a 10-minute monologue and you're more left confused than you were when you started. I think that's his vibe. But for him, the Plague Doctor, funnily enough, was in my first book, Villain Seeking Hero, as like a mystical character who pops up in a period accurate time for when Plague Doctors were around. And when I was writing the original Midnight Western Theater, when there's in issue 3, a character bumps into a mystic and it's the Plague Doctor again. And that was just me playing around with, both books are set in the same universe. And that was like a fun little Easter egg just for me. And then with this one, I was like, no, wait, if there's something, I can do something with him. And I fleshed him out a whole lot more, because I'm like, well, if he's part of the world, then he's got to be involved. And I had a lot of fun with just writing him. He's a mess in a completely other direction than the other characters. So I'm as the series continues, you will see more sides to him and like how old he exactly is as it goes along. So I think it's going to go in a lot of different ways people won't expect.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see that, because like you said, he's almost this middle kind of wild card character at the moment, where you could, as a writer, probably take him in about 3 or 4 different directions. So I'm really interested to see what direction you take it, and if it's one I've even thought of, because you're right. You're probably going to surprise the shit out of me. I'm going to be like, what is this? And like, you're going to email from me being like, what the heck, man? How did you do this so well? And it wasn't on my radar.
I think for anyone reading this book, there are a lot of, it's not going to, a lot of people say this, but it's not going to go the way you think. Every time you think we're going to zig, we're going to zag. And when you think we're going to zag, we're going to zig. And not in a way of like, I'm trying to subvert your expectations, but luckily the story just is what it is. And sometimes the story tells you what it has to be before you even figure out what you want to do.
Right. That's one of my favorite things actually to hear when somebody's writing like a comic or a book or what have you, is, you ask them like, why did this happen? Or why did you choose to do this? And Ryan just looks at me like, I didn't choose to do it. It had to happen. Like the story said it had to happen. So there it is. Like,
no, it's bizarre, because there are things that I would like to see in the book, but then there are things as a writer, I'm like, oh, well, naturally it would happen. When I watch media or when I read a book, I really hate it when there's a moment that takes you out of the show, where like you would look at let's say the protagonist, think like, well, logically you wouldn't do that. Like when there's one thing I hate is when there's this evil character and then all the good guys team up and they beat up the evil character, and right before they're gonna kill the bad guy, it's like, no, we can't kill him. Like he needs to wallow in what he's wrought. And then it's like, no, like this guy murdered millions of people. Just kill him. Something like that. Or I hate plot armor. I hate a lot of that's the quote. I hate a lot of things. So when something becomes a pet peeve in the media you consume, as a content, or I don't want to call myself a content critic, as a writer, you don't want to repeat the sins that you yourself don't enjoy, because if you don't like it, there's probably plenty of people that also won't like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can imagine that's hard to do, though, because, again, sometimes when writing, something you may write happens and you're like, wait a second, that's a thing I don't like to see. Crap! Rewrite time!
I'll tell you this. Issue 3, which you didn't get to read, I'm withholding.
No, I did not. I got. See, guys, even I don't get everything. I get withheld too as a fan.
I'm withholding issue 3 from like everyone, and because there's just this one moment in particular where, like, when the artist was drawing it, he had to message Butch Mapa. He messaged me saying, like, dude, you made me cry. Because like he was drawing like one scene and he's like, why'd you do that? Like, and then I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that, but so if the people helping make the book or people making the book like get such a reaction out of it, then you've done something right. So
right.
I feel good, and it's not like everyone don't go crazy. It's nothing bad. It's nothing horrific. It's nothing whatever. It's not gonna like be the most horrible thing you've ever seen in your life. It's just what would naturally happen in a story like this. And
I mean, I think that's important with any media. Like, so something that can make a media that, maybe has a more simple plot, not saying this is one of those, but just for example, something has a very simple plot or something goes one way or the other. One way you can up how great that story or whatever that is by, creating an emotional response out of people. And of course, like you said, there are crappy ways of doing it. Like, we're just going to do this just to piss people off, or we're just going to do this for this. But when you can write something authentic that naturally and organically, as it evolves, things happen that just naturally will elicit an emotional response out of people, a connection for better or worse or otherwise, as long as it makes sense for the story and the characters, that creates a phenomenal story instantly, no matter how simple your plot is or your characters or your world.
No, I think you have to keep, like I was kind of saying, I think you have to make yourself interested, you have to enjoy what you're writing, or otherwise if you're bored by what you're creating, or if you're disappointed by what you're seeing, then not everyone else, but a good portion of your readers are not going to like it either. Which is why for a lot of my books, if I'm writing it and I'm bored, then I'll scrap the whole thing. And I will go back and I'm like, well, okay, here's a great example. I'm currently writing a sci-fi noir book, and it's set in a resort, like a what's the word? It's just like a space beach resort, and there's one issue where I wrote it and I showed it to my partner, and they said to me like, "Oh, everything goes by too quickly," and I'm like, "Yeah, you're right." And I go back and like the whole opening, it's just like, this is boring. This sucks, and I can admit that. And I'm like, well, what would I go back? Like, how can I? I'm like, I don't know a single thing of how I could fix this. And I go back and I scrap it all, and then I was like, well, what's funny to me? And then I just wrote a scene that was funny, which was instead of dealing with any of the main characters, it opens with like a Karen moment at the resort, where it's like this guy complaining to this concierge about like how he doesn't have enough ice cubes in his drink, and like somehow he's making it the concierge's problem. And then it's like, and the guy's like doing his customer service smile, and it goes along and along, and then like the story collides into the main meat of the story. I'm like, okay, great. I've come up with something at least a little bit entertaining, and I've segued it into the main meat and potatoes, and then it comes up with something new, I guess.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Is this a project you can like tell us who's publishing it and all that, or is this top secret?
That one's top secret at the moment. A lot of my projects I can't really talk about. I'm drowning. I'm drowning in projects, it would seem. But I'm proud to say that none of the books are the same. Like everything feels really different from one another, and that is very it's very enriching as a writer, because it never feels like you're writing the same thing twice.
Yeah, I can imagine, like, after a while, if you did that, you, as you say, might get bored and be like, well, why am I doing this?
I gotta say, that's why I'm glad we're going to be talking about the noir thing, because while I love Midnight Western Theater, I've been writing goth cowboys for close to 2 years. And it's so refreshing to be able to do something else and write something else, because, I, as someone who's fairly new on the scene, not really having that wide bibliography yet, you don't really want to end up being typecasted as the Wild West guy. So I'm really happy that things are starting to open up more.
Yeah, the Goth Cowboys, is that the one that is with the new Whatnot Publishing that's coming up?
No. Oh, well, the Goth Cowboys is is Hortensia, but with the Whatnot, in case, I'm sure people know this already, but Whatnot has teamed up with Massive to basically become like this big publishing brand. They just upgraded to the deluxe tier in Previews World. Nice. So they're already a heavy hitter, and they've got several imprints going, and one of which is Sumerian Comics. And for people in the know, they used to be Behemoth, and now they were published by Sumerian Records. They're doing a big relaunch, and I am fortunate enough to be part of that relaunch. And
nice.
Thank you. And I am coming in with a 3-issue miniseries. It's a noir. It's not. I can talk about this. It's a noir called The Blackout Bombshell, and it is like what do you get if you mix like the Maltese Falcon with Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and like a little dash of Mad Men. It's set in the 1960s, and it's about an alcoholic detective who, during a blackout, he is hired to solve a case, and by the time he is sober, he doesn't remember who hired him. He doesn't remember what he's supposed to do, and all he knows is that he's in a world of trouble. So why not? Let's tell the people. I can tell the people. Why? Who cares? I'm working with Dean Kotz on that book, who is a phenomenal artist. I've got Patrick Burmeyer on colors.
Love him. He's one of my favorites, Patrick.
I got Heather Vaughn and Bill Sienkiewicz on covers, and then the variants are. We're all over the place.
Yeah,
we're all over the place with people we got there. So I'm not gonna bore you with the list, but that was a mistake on Sumerian's part, because they're like, well, you can do whatever you want, and I'm like, what? Like I can hire these people, and they're like, yeah, sure. I'm like, oh okay, yeah, let's do it. And I have some weird picks. I nearly hired Ken Penders, but my partner had my partner had to talk me out of that, because it's like, don't do that. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. But I'm very, very happy with all the picks there. But yeah, that project's gonna be something else when that comes out.
That's awesome. It sounds like a great time, and honestly sounds right up my alley. And a lot of people I know that watch the channel here, we're all in for a good noir mystery. That is right up our alley, especially if there's a lot of variant covers to collect. We got a lot of collectors here, man.
Oh no, people will be happy about that. I'll tell you, like, it's okay. Not a spoiler. It's coming out soon. there's one. It's a noir. It's a 1960s noir, and I reached out to one guy, and I'm like, "Can you make a anime? Can you make like a variant inspired by Neon Genesis Evangelion, like the poster with like the lady on their side, but with like all these detective characters?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And I got the art, and it was one of those things where it's like, "This is my job. Like, this is what am I doing? Like, how did I get here?" It was just the most unhinged visual I've ever seen in my life, and that's my job. And I don't know, it was, that was a good day. That was a good day.
That is so exciting, and honestly, that's probably one of my favorite things about the comics medium is, like you said, how there's so many different things you can create with comics. That's a thing. Other mediums, you're writing a book with just words, maybe an image or two, if it's a novel. There's all, but comics, that the sky is literally the limit. Comics is like one of the most diverse mediums out there because there's so many different ways you can do 2,000 things. You can tell the same story in a trillion different ways, which you can do in other mediums as well to an extent, but comics, it's like you said, like you can't ask for that in other mediums.
No, but you can't get away with that. But what you just said is venom to artists' ears. The last thing they want to hear is like, "Oh, with comics you could put like 1,000 spaceships, and each spaceship is different from the other spaceship." That's like, "Oh yeah, thank you, good job, thank you." But
true. They're all like blacklisting me as I continue to speak. They're like, "Please, God, no! Enemy to the artist. That's too much."
Well, that's a good segue. Let's get back to Midnight Western Theater, because I would be remiss but to shout out and hype up the entire creative team of the prequel, because they all did a phenomenal job. We have Butch Mappa as the artist, and he is a killer. He is phenomenal at what he does, and he is already making just huge splashes in the industry. Other than doing Midnight, like he's part of the team doing the he's the main artist, the new Archie book featuring its first trans character, Danny Taylor, and like that's huge. Then we have Sean Peacock, who is an up and coming artist and colorist, and he did great. I've been saying this everywhere, but like the amount of research he put into coming up with the color palette for this specific book was like unnecessarily insane, but also completely like, thank you, like that was great, because he read old romance comics to try to create a color palette for this book. And I'm like, you didn't have to do that, but it helps. It was so good. And then my ever faithful and long suffering letterer, Buddy Bodwin, I work on every project with him. I have been since I came onto the scene, and he always tops his last work. And as long as I'm working, he's going to be there with me. And I'm just happy to have him on this book. And I already mentioned Julianne Griep. She did these fantastic Art Nouveau covers. Happy to have her aboard. And I keep getting her to do different things. And then for variants, we do have 2 variant covers by horror artist Michael Ramstead, who, if you're for people who may not be familiar with him, he's very prominent on social media, where he does a lot of almost cottagecore Halloween type of art. And the second I found him, I was like, you're drawing some goth cowboys, you're drawing some witches, you're drawing some demon men. Come aboard. And what I'm happy to say is the original book was me as like the new talent and a bunch of industry pros. We got David Hahn and Ryan Cody, and Buddy was there, and as well as Kalman Andrzejowski. Like those three guys specifically, they've been around the block, and I'm very happy that now that this is my second chance, come at it with just some up and coming talents, and to give people opportunities to do something good, because I know it was a struggle for me to get in. So now that I am, I've kicked the door open, and I'm desperately trying to get people not to throw me out. I'm trying to let a couple people in with me.
Yeah.
And that's a good feeling.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, especially in the comics community, getting in while also bringing in at least 5 other people with you. that is, and then, they're bringing 5 other people. Like, I think that is the whole point and what makes comics such a wonderful group, despite how hard it is to, be in the industry and what the challenges it has. But this has a release date of July 12th. But the FOC final order cutoff is June 5th. And in case you guys watching us at home later don't know, these books really, really thrive on those final order cutoffs, meaning you've got those orders in before it comes out. So I would highly, highly recommend getting that FOC date, getting your orders into your shop before June 5th, so that you can support Louis and the entire creative team, because it makes a huge difference to all of these wonderful creators.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, man. Like, I mean, seriously, the cover alone got me, and it's such a fun read, and I really can't wait for issue 3, because when issue 3 is out, I'm gonna be pulling it up and immediately, like, probably emailing you and be like, I see why you withheld this. But second of all,
no,
how dare you?
You will. No, everyone, you have to go out, tell your go walk straight up to your comic book retailer, tell them we need this, your store needs this book. If you don't have the hottest, best book of the summer, then we're gonna riot. Tell them the store's gonna shut down if they don't have this specific book.
I mean, there's demons, there's hell, there's witches, there's zombies. It has literally something everybody wants in it. So
it has everything. It literally has everything. I don't know. We can't sell this book anymore. Like, everyone, you have to, and if everyone buy 5 copies, one for you, one to read, one to frame, one to sell, one to CGC, and the other one just to throw in the garbage, just because you can say you can. Like, I could do this. Why not? Yeah.
Or give it to your mom. Give it to your mom.
Or that. Yeah, why not? Okay. Lauren.
I think the mom needs it more than the garbage, but I mean, controversial take.
Sure, fine. It's not like I made the book or anything.
Well, thank you so much, man, for coming on. It's been such a pleasure having you. Please, if there's anything else last minute you want to share about Midnight Western Theater, please tell us, and then plug yourself away. Where can people find you? Keep up with everything else coming up in the future.
Well, I think the book's good. I like it. It's a good time. So so that's the last thing I have to say about that. But about me, I'm Louis Southard. I'm on Instagram at LouisSouthard. I'm on Twitter at LouisJSouthard. You can also just Google Louis Southard, and hopefully I'll pop up. But so if you want to keep up with me, heaven forbid, then you'll be able to find me.
I can guarantee that we've got some good neighbors in the neighborhood that they know how to do their sleuthing, so they will find you, Louis.
Hopefully they don't find too much.
Well, thanks again for coming on, Louis. Love to have you back on anytime in the future. To all the nerdy neighbors watch this at home, I'll put all Louis's links below and the link to the Previews World for Midnight Western Theater, so that you've got the code, you can order it, all that great stuff. Just click a couple times and you can stalk Louis, you can order a great comic. I mean, that's all you need to do, right? That's all you need to do.
That's it.
There's one more thing you can do though. For the channel here, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, all that super cheesy but important stuff. It helps us grow, and it helps us further support indie creators like Louis and bring them to your screen so that you can find some other great comics without having to do research and reading yourself, because who has time for that? We do, apparently. I have the time for you. You're welcome.
I made 17 different burner accounts just to subscribe to you. So
thank you. That's the dedication we need.
If every fan is not doing that, then can they really call themselves a fan? I don't know.
Can they call themselves a neighbor? I don't know. Louis has set the new standard. Every neighbor needs at least 17 burner accounts following the account. So you all can thank Louis for that high standard.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks again, neighbors. Be sure to keep up with Louis and Midnight Western Theater, and we'll see you guys next time in the Nerdy Neighborhood.